Hey everyone, today we're going to take the next step here in this Congress unit and just go back to really the basics of what you think of when you think of, what does Congress do? Whenever I ask that question, whether it be high schoolers, middle schoolers, the sixth grade civics class, the answer is always they make laws, right? That's what they do. We say the executive branch, enforces the law, the legislative branch makes the laws. They create the laws. So that's what we're going to walk through today. So we're not going to watch Schoolhouse Rock, but I will tell you this. Schoolhouse Rock came out when I was in elementary school, and when I graduated high school, that was still probably the one thing that stuck in my head as far as how a bill becomes law. It wasn't, my middle school social studies teacher, my high school social studies teacher, even though I know they touched on it. But the Schoolhouse Rock version of that does a phenomenal job, if you think about it, at showing the steps. And when you're in third grade, you don't really notice what they are, but I'm going to point those out. Okay, so on your own, grab a computer, get on YouTube, watch this after this video, and see if you can pick out the things, things that they don't always talk about, like introducing a bill or sending it to committee, those types of things that are in that cartoon, and most people don't have any idea of how it works. So. How a bill becomes law. I'm just going to show you just the basic function right here, and then we're going to break these steps down. Obviously, it's introduced into the chamber. It then is sent to committee to be studied. We talked about committees the other day, and in the House, it goes to the Rules Committee, and they sort out all the details about debate and voting. And then it is debated and it's voted on. So if this happens in the House, if it's introduced in the House, by the way, it can be introduced into either chamber first. We're just going to take the example of it introduced into the House first. If it is introduced, it goes through all these steps, and they vote on it, and they vote yes, well, or if they vote no, then the bill is dead. If they vote yes, it goes to the Senate, okay? And that's kind of how that works. So it could lose in the House, and it will never go to the other chamber. If it starts in the Senate, and they vote no in the Senate, it never gets to the House. So that's kind of something important to understand. Bills don't always get to both chambers. So no vote, it's dead, yes vote, then it goes to the other chamber, and they kind of do the same thing. As they go through it, it's introduced, it's given a number, sent to committee, but you'll notice this big chunk right here. More on that in a little bit. There's no Rules Committee in the Senate. So then it's debated on and voted on. If they vote no in the Senate, it's dead. It doesn't matter how the House voted. If they vote no, it's dead. If they vote yes, then it goes to conference committee and then ultimately to the President of the United States for his signature. So that's just the basics of it. And if you understand that, you understand more than most people out there about this process. So that's we're going to break this down. So we're going to start in the House. Okay. So first of all, a bill is introduced and it's given a number, and the order in which it's introduced is the number that it gets. So when a new term starts, the first bill that's introduced gets the number H.R. 1. The second bill introduced gets the number H.R. 2, and so on until until the end of the term. Then it starts back over after that. So it's given a number, it's read, all that stuff, and then it's sent to committees and these permanent committees, these standing committees that we looked at the other day. And they're going to take it. If it's an education bill, it goes to the Committee on Education. If it's about the environment, it goes to the Environment Committee. Climate, blah, blah, blah. So those are those standing committees that it goes to. And basically what you're looking at when you're looking at these committees is this is where the work gets done, right? Not the floor. We love, watching these debates, and on the nightly news, they'll give you a short little clip of some House member up there railing against a bill or some House member up there railing, to get something passed or whatever. But that's not where the action is, right? It's in committees. That's what that's what helps it get done, because they can't just take everything all at once. Like you can't have all 435 members talk about a specific bill on climate, right? That's sent to the committee, they work on it, and then it comes back out. And so there's several things that these committees can do when the bill is in committee. One thing that they can do is they can report it out favorably. So once they get it, they study it, they look at it, they do all the interviews, all the research on it, and if they like it, inside the committee they'll vote on it. And if they say, majority say, yes, we like this bill, that's called reporting out favorably. All right, and which means basically what that committee is telling the rest of the House to do is to vote yes on it, because we like this in our committee, so we think it's a good bill. Let's vote yes on it. If they report it out unfavorably, what that means is we're sending this bill out to you guys, for possible debate and all that stuff, but it's probably not a good idea. But we want to give you guys the opportunity to take a look at it. That's, those are the options that we see most of the time. But what happens if they don't let it out of committee, right? This is called pigeonholing or tabling. Once a bill is introduced and it goes to the committee can, they don't have to report it out. What they can do is they can say, we don't want this to leave this committee. And essentially what that does to a bill is it kills it. Because if it never comes out of committee, it's never going to get debated on the floor and it's never going to get voted on. So the committees can kill a bill by pigeonholing it or tabling it. Those two words mean the same thing. Now, what happens if that bill is in committee and the committee doesn't want to put it out to the rest of the body for debate, whatever? There is such a thing called a discharge petition, right? So if you get enough votes in the House, those members can force a bill out of committee for consideration in the full House. So there is a mechanism, even if the committee doesn't want to report it out because they want to kill it, there is a way to get it out by voting on a discharge petition. So, what else can they do in committee? Most of the time, and this is where it's going to make sense when I walk you through the Senate as well, they can change it. They can amend it, right? Just because a bill's introduced doesn't mean that when it goes to committee, they don't change it. They always change it, right? They add amendments to it. They do research and they say, well, this doesn't really fit with what it is, so we have to update this bill. Those changes happen all the time, and that's called a markup session. So during a markup session, that's where all the changes based on the research, based on the debates going back and forth among committee members, that's where that happens. So just want to remind you real quick of the standing committees, right? So this is the 116th Congress. So the data from this point forward is the 116th, this current Congress that we're in. And these are those committees. So a bill is introduced and it goes to a committee. I think you get it. Because we talked about this the other day. If it is if it's a question about a bank, something with banks or regulation with a bank, it's probably financial services, right? And so those types of things. If it's about the military, it's probably going to go to armed services. That's those standing committees. Okay, just wanted to remind you of those. So this is the committee structure, and this is where the information that most people do not have. I'm going to take an example, okay? A standing committee, I'm going to talk about the House Committee on Natural Resources, okay? And the way these committees are broken down, you'll notice the color blue right here because it's the House of Representatives right now is controlled by the Democrats. They have the majority. So because they have the majority, they get to pick the chairman of the committee. And the chairman of the committee will always be a member of the majority party. So, for example, the Democrats control. So this committee, House Committee on Natural Resources, you can see the chair, Representative Raul Grijalva. So he's the committee. He's the leading Democrat on this committee. He's the one in their separate meetings, banging the gavel, calling the shots. But you also see a ranking member. Okay, the ranking member is Ron Bishop, Republican from Utah. Now, the word ranking means basically the person on that committee with the most years of experience in the minority party. So the ranking member will be the top. In this case, the top Republican in that committee. That's why they're called the ranking member. And the chair, of course, is the top Democrat in that committee because the Democrats have the majority. And this specific committee has 42 members. You have 23 Democrats and you have 19 Republicans. You will always have the majority party will always have more members in every committee, right? Since they have the majority, they get to assign people to these committees. They always assign more of their own party because if the committee has to vote on something, whether or not to report something out favorably or report something out unfavorably, they have more votes than the minority party. So that's always the case. But these committees are also broken down into subcommittees. And the subcommittees, for this one, you have the subcommittee on energy and mineral resources. You have the subcommittee on indigenous persons. You have oversight and investigations. You have water, oceans, and wildlife. And you also have national parks, forests, and public lands. So, a bill is sent to this committee. It is then further divided up among the subcommittees. And of course, the subcommittees also have a chair because, if they're meeting, they have a ranking member, blah, blah, blah. So this subcommittee is made up, those 7 Democrats and 6 Republicans, those people come from these people. And these people come from the House of Representatives. So that's kind of what happens. So you're going to have these members, the 23 Democrats are each assigned to subcommittees. That's kind of how that works. So once it goes through committee, and let's say the committee reports it out, doesn't pigeonhole it, but puts it out there either favorably or unfavorably. Once they put it out, it then has to go to the Rules Committee. Now, the Rules Committee only exists in the House, and they make all these decisions. First of all, before it's debated on, can it be amended? Are we going to allow members outside of the committee to put amendments on this bill? Okay, that's one of the first things that they look at. The Rules Committee is going to set time limits on debate because you can't just have unlimited debate. That's the Senate. We'll talk about that in a second. So we'll say, well, we're going to allow 10 members of the House 15 minutes each to talk about this bill, right? And so they set the time limits because they can't just allow. There are 435 members. They can't allow everybody. So that's what happens. They're going to schedule it, right? They're going to say we're going to debate this in the third week of March. We're going to put it on the calendar for then. And I will tell you what, the term traffic cop I think comes to mind here. And basically they're dictating, okay, this bill's going to come through, this one's not. This one we're going to put on the calendar here. This other one we're going to put on the calendar here. We're going to schedule debate. And so they're the ones kind of deciding all of these, these details of how a bill is going to proceed, once they get there. So, just something about putting it on the calendar. You can always tell if it's a popular bill or an unpopular bill. If they schedule it soon after it comes out of committee, that means they want to get it done. If they schedule it for December, right? There's chances that it's not going to happen because they're going to run out of time. And a lot of these bills are basically left in the House when the term ends. And it depends on you might have 170 bills in committee. If the term ends, they're done. They go away. They're thrown in the trash. You have to start back over the next time. So putting it on the calendar will tell you whether or not leadership in the House wants it to happen or doesn't want it to happen. So debate in the House of Representatives, very structured. There's time limits. And if you don't want to speak, or if each, they assign people, 15 minutes or 20 minutes apiece, and there's an expert in your group, and you're not quite an expert, but you get to talk on it. What you can do is you can talk for 2 minutes, say, I yield my remaining time to the distinguished gentleman from the great state of Kansas. And then, that person then will take your time plus their time. And so they can do that, and you'll see that a lot. You'll hear the experts usually talking on these bills. And when they, after debate is completed, they're going to vote on it. And a couple of ways that they can vote. A lot of times, if it's going to be overwhelming, they'll use a voice vote, and that means that's basically all in favor say aye, and aye, and then they listen for which one's louder. With legislation, they really can't do that in the House because you have to know how people voted. So when it's something like that, then they'll use a computerized roll call vote. Basically, they've got the little cards and they walk in the House when it's open for debate. And that the House Rules Committee sets that as well. We're going to leave debate open for 30 minutes. So you guys have 30 minutes to go vote on this bill. And what they'll walk in, they'll swipe the card, a little box, and they'll vote yes, no, or abstain, right? Or if they just don't show up. And however they vote, up at the front of the House of Representatives, there's this giant board with everybody's name on it. And it's got a green light. They vote yes, it'll turn green. If they vote no, it'll turn red. If they abstain, it'll turn white. And so basically, that's how we know how people voted. And this goes back forever. You can go back and look. And this is one of the things the Congressional Research Service does, is they keep track of how people voted. You can find out in 1956 how the representative from Kansas voted on everything, because it's public record. So that's kind of what we look at. We know how they vote all the time. It's not a secret. And of course, it does require a majority to pass. And if it passes, it goes to the next chamber. It goes to the Senate. Now, I'll walk through the Senate real quick here because it's almost the same. Bills can also begin in the Senate. In this example, it starts in the House and then goes to the Senate. It can start in the Senate and go to the House, with one exception. If it is a revenue bill, in other words, if they're going to raise your taxes, that one must start in the House and then go to the Senate. Outside of revenue bills, it can start in either chamber. So in our example, we started in the House. So then it goes to the Senate. And, the same thing, but you'll notice a big hole there. There's no Rules Committee. Another difference is that senators can vote to put a hold on a bill. So if one senator wants to put a hold on it, they can do that, and basically whatever the process is, wherever it is in the Senate, it stops right there and remains there until that senator releases a hold. And I think the reason they put that in there is to make sure that if something is so egregious to you or maybe your state, that was a safety mechanism that we can stop this until let's take a look at it. You guys might not understand my state. I do, so I'm going to put a hold on it so it stops it and let you know why I'm doing it. So, but these are anonymous too. You can do this and nobody really knows who's putting a hold on it. These are really rare, but it is something that they can do. You can't do that in the House. The bill must go through the process. You can table it in the committee, but there's always that discharge petition. And the discharge petition, by the way, works in the Senate as well. Now, the difference between the Senate and the House, the other thing is, if you're voting on things, if you get a majority, 51 out of 100, you have a majority and bills pass. The difference, though, is usually it takes 60, not 51. And the reason it takes 60 is because of this, the filibuster. This is only in the Senate, okay? In the Senate, you've got Rule 22 that states that the Senate will have unlimited debate. Well, if you have unlimited debate, that means you can't vote on it until everybody's ready, right? And so what the filibuster is basically is you get up and you talk a bill to death, because as long as debate is going on, you cannot bring it up for a vote. So if there's somebody that wants to talk about this bill is very, very important to me. So I'm going to stand up here and I'm going to talk and make sure you guys understand, why this is important, we should pass it, or why we don't like it, why we're not going to let it pass. And the filibuster almost always is the party or the people that don't want it to pass. Because if they're going to bring it up for a vote and you don't like it, you know that they can't vote on it if people are still talking about it. So a good way to kill it is if I just stand up there and just keep talking and talking and talking and talking and talking, they can't bring it up for a vote and it's going to die. All right. Now, the thing about this is, though, most of the time, the Senate grounds to a halt. If there's debate going on, you really can't do anything else. You can't get anything other work done in the Senate. So it upsets people, right? And if you keep talking, they can't bring any other legislation up for a vote or for debate. So a lot of times it's effective because the other party wants to move on to something else. And they'll say, fine, we understand, you're going to filibuster this to death, you're going to talk it to death. Right, all right, we relinquish, fine, we won't bring it up for a vote because we want to move on to something else. Boom. Then you can sit down, and say, hey, look, I kept it from coming up for a vote. Good for me. That's a filibuster. Now, the longest filibuster on record is Senator Strom Thurmond, Republican from South Carolina, and he was filibustering a civil rights bill, and he stood in the chamber 24 hours, 18 minutes. Now, the thing about this is you can't just, stop whenever you want to. You have to talk. Strom Thurmond, I think I've told this story before, the day before he was set to, debate this, and he knew this was coming, he went to the sauna and sweat out all the fluid in his body so he wouldn't have to go to the bathroom the next day. It's just bizarre. You can only, drink water and milk. You can't lean on the podium. I mean, there are strict rules with the filibuster. The old movie, and this is a great movie, guys. If you ever get a chance to rent this, Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. Great movie. Jimmy Stewart, famous actor. It's based on a senator that was upset with the things that were going on in Washington, and so he filibusters a bill. And so it's a great example of the filibuster and a great movie. Jimmy Stewart, one of my favorite actors, one of the best actors of all time. So Strom Thurmond set the record for a single person. But you can tag team it, right? You can have another senator, get up and go after you. And as long as there are more members willing to get up and talk, you can't bring anything up for a vote. So the record there is 75 days, where you had senators tag team to kill the Civil Rights Act of 1964. They failed. It passed anyway. So now, and because we know that. It was a law of the land. Like I said, you only drink water, milk. You have to stay on your feet. All of those things. Now the thing about the filibuster is you can end it. Right? It is possible to end a filibuster, and what that has is that takes a 3/5 vote or 60. So if somebody's filibustering something, if you get 60 votes, right, that's invoking what we call cloture. So that's a vocab word, cloture. If 60 members of the chamber say, sit down, be quiet, we're done with this, we're going to bring it up for a vote, you have to sit down. That's very hard to do, to get 60 votes. And you could essentially, this is a weapon that they had to kill it, because you're not going to get 60 unless one party has 60 members. It's almost impossible. And so it got to the point when Democratic Harry Reid from Nevada, they were so frustrated with the Republican members threatening to filibuster, so nothing was getting done. He put in what we called the nuclear option. Now, this is a problem. This is what I always tell people when you are in a position of authority, because the Democrats had control of the Senate at that point. They basically said, we're going to do away with that, specifically for judges. And so we're only going to need 51 because the Republicans were, obstructing the judges getting confirmed. And so they did that. Now, be careful, because all of a sudden we're like, oh, we only need 51 votes, because you're not always going to be in power. So when it flipped to the Republicans, now all of a sudden the Democrats are like, shoot, now, we can't use the filibuster. But they still did it with Supreme Court judges and other federal judges. So the Republicans then put in the nuclear option. That's why you only had to have 51 votes with these last 3 Supreme Court justices we had, is because the Republicans did the same thing the Democrats did. So if you want to blame somebody for, what's going on in Congress, both parties are equally to blame. So that's what that is. We'll see if that ever goes away, if they ever bring it back. I'm not sure. So in the Senate, same thing. Committee members. Here's probably the matching committee with the example we saw in the House. And they have a chair, Senator Murkowski. And since the Republicans are controlling the Senate, the Republicans get to pick the chair. So the ranking member, Joe Manchin from West Virginia, is the ranking member. 20 members, fewer members because it's a smaller body. But they still have, the subcommittees and all that. So same structure. Now, let's say that it goes to the House. They vote yes. It goes to the Senate, all that committee stuff. They vote yes. Does it then go to the president? No, because of what happens when a bill goes through. When it goes to the House and they get it all done, they say, I mentioned markup. Well, that happens in the Senate as well. So if it goes through the House and then they vote yes, it goes to the Senate, almost every time they change it, right? They do their own research. They add amendments to it as well. And if they vote yes, it's not the same bill, right? It's been changed. It has to be the same bill. So once that happens and it's different, they can't send it to the president. So they will send it to a conference committee. And a conference committee is made up of both members of both the House and the Senate. They get together, they hammer out these differences, and basically make it the same bill. Now, this committee, they can amend it, they can change it, they can do anything. The regular committees can, the standing committees, and they can kill it as well. This is sometimes called the third house of Congress. Haven't seen that on a test, a national test, but just remember that it is the third house of Congress, because any changes have to be approved. So goes through the House, they say yes, goes to the Senate, they say yes, but it's changed, so it goes to conference committee. Then they figure out the differences and they make it the same in both. Then it has to go back and be re-voted on, because it has to be voted on in identical form. And then, and only then, when they both say yes on that new one, on that clean one, then and only then can it go to the president. So once it gets to the president, what can the president do? Well, he's got several options. We'll talk more about these when we get in the executive branch unit. He can sign it and make it law, right? That's one of the things. If it's a popular bill, they voted yes, president signs it, becomes law. He can veto it. You've heard of this. And when a president vetoes it, it basically says, I forbid, I don't want this. Now, just because the president vetoes it doesn't mean it's dead, because it can then go back to Congress. And if both chambers, if they have a 2/3 vote to override the veto, it becomes law over a presidential veto. That's rare, because once a president vetoes something, it very rarely gets out. I'll show you those veto statistics when we get to that unit. The other thing he can do is he can hold on to it, right? And here he has 10 days, right? Whenever a bill is sent to the president for a signature or veto or whatever he's going to do, he has 10 days. And so basically what happens is, if he holds on to it and Congress is in session, it means they're there in Washington, they're doing their work, he holds on to it, and basically it's going to become law without a signature. Like, dude, you had 10 days. We're waiting on it. And if you don't sign it, if you don't do anything for it, it becomes law over your signature, or it becomes law even without your signature because you took too long. Now, that's if Congress is in session. What if Congress has adjourned, right, and they're not there? Well, here's the other thing. The 10 days, right? If they send it to the president and then they go on break and they adjourn and the president has 10 days, well, if they're not there, If he holds on to it at that point, it's dead, right? Because they're not there to force him to do anything. So that is called the pocket veto. Imagine that, right? They send it to the president, he puts it in his pocket, they leave town, he's like, yep, nobody around, it's dead, right? So if they're in session, it becomes law without his signature. If they're out of session, it's dead, right? That's called the pocket veto. So, and again, these are the games that are played between executive branch and legislative branch sometimes. And so what happens if they just don't like one part of it and the president doesn't want to veto the whole thing, just that one part? Okay, that's called a line item veto, and they can't do that anymore. It was an option for Bill Clinton back in the 90s. He had it, and he started using the line item veto, which means I don't like this part of the bill, so I'm going to veto that part, but I'm going to keep the rest of it. And the Supreme Court quickly took that case up and said, no, that means the president is making legislation, and that violates the Constitution. They can't do that. Only Congress can make laws. So we don't have the line item veto anymore. But I wonder how much other stuff would get done if the president did that. It probably depends on whether or not you like the current president that's in there. So, like, think about the stimulus bill they're doing right now. Some of the sticking points are, kind of small, but they Congress doesn't like him. Meanwhile, the money's not getting out to the economy, whether it's to businesses or to people or to whatever. If a president can say, well, let's get rid of the thing that they're, that they're disagreeing on and get the money out there, that would be better. But then again, he's making legislation, so no, he can't do that. So what does this mean all, to sum this up? How many bills, et cetera? If we go back to the 110th Congress, in that Congress, there were roughly 4,300 bills that were introduced into the House, and probably close to 2,200 bills that were introduced into the Senate. Of those bills, right, we're talking, 6,000, almost 7,000. And basically, of those, only 430 actually became public laws, passed into law, right? Now, that doesn't seem like a whole lot, but that's, a little less than average. The Congress, though, and this goes back, if you're ever reading an older textbook from a couple years ago, the 113th Congress, this was called the Do-Nothing Congress because they didn't get anything done, hardly. So 5,893 House bills, 3,020 Senate bills, only produced 296 laws. Okay, that's called the Do-Nothing Congress. We're gonna explore this here in just a second. But what about this current Congress, right? The 116th Congress that we're currently in. How many bills have they passed? And remember, it's about to end. We're in December. So they've got a couple of weeks left to finish all this up. So where are they? Are they better than the Do-Nothing Congress? Are they worse than the Do-Nothing Congress? So far, they have passed only 193 bills as of the recording of this video. 193. Crazy. So Congress, and people say, well, why do people not like Congress? Because of this. They're not getting anything done. They're not really being responsible. We talked about the incumbency, thing about why, 90% re-election rate. Well, that's why. So this is where we are right now. So that's, kind of how bill becomes law. We do have an activity that we're going to do. We're going to trace it through the process. But hopefully you understand all of that. It's not, it's a little bit more technical than Schoolhouse Rock, which it needs to be for you guys. And hopefully you get this. So if you have any questions, obviously, you guys have my email. Shoot them to me. I'll get back to you as quickly as I can. Other than that, we will catch you next time. All right. Bye.